And perhaps we need might be the CEO have to answer that. The high impact dams, as they're now classified in New Zealand, isn't a dam break analysis a fundamental part of the consenting process?
I can't answer that actually without looking it up, but I would expect it would be an integral part of any assessment of effects.
We actually have had when we transferred our responsibilities to Waikato Regional Council, we did discuss all these aspects, didn't we?
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, that's all I intend to say.
That, Mr. Chair, can you tell us, Andrew, what kind of specifications of an earthquake this dam is designed to withstand?
Well, I'll tell you this. One of the parts of the geological assessment that's been undertaken is to effectively look at various displacements in the last 20,000 year period in and around stress fracture issues and so forth. So, and that's de-risked, actually de-risked the process. So, these. Other than that, I'm not going to say, because I'd need an engineer to sit here and actually tell you in detail. But the point is that this has to be tested through public process, through consent applications, and the highest level of design criteria. That's the point I'm making. So, and it's a work in progress.
I think, from the point of view of the public, while you're saying that this might be a very low probability, if it does happen, the consequences are very serious and high, aren't they? And so that's why public concern is.
Let's be clear. That dam break analysis did not look at a whole lot of fatalities, for example. All right.
Fatalities? Did you say?
Yes, as per one or two comments.
Fatalities.
So my point is that this is a process. There's a whole heap of rigour in that process, and that's exactly where the debate should lie, and it should be properly technically informed when it takes place.
Can I further add to that from a council perspective? I mean, that, as Mr Newman has pointed out, I mean, that information that was the subject of yesterday's media coverage was well worked. It's been out now for a year. And a lot of people knew about it, as was affirmed by some of the feedback to Radio New Zealand through their talkbacks.
Correct.
Let's continue.
Okay. All right. So DNC is really going to be a major focus really through this next period, is the point I'm making there. I don't think I need to necessarily go through the EPA consent and application related matters other than to say exactly what I said at the start, and that is now sitting in their hands. So.
Can I just ask on that one,
Yep.
as far as the members of that, what input, if any, did Regional Council or HBRC have into the composition of the board?
Very little.
How much?
Very little.
Well, for example, one of the lawyers there, Matthew Lawson, has done work for Regional Council in the last 6 years.
And your point is?
Was the EPA aware of that?
I don't know.
The EPA ran their own process, councillor.
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
Do they not check information?
Well, you would have to ask them.
No, they did not inform us, and it's the minister's decision actually. But there was no conversation with us about the detailed composition of that panel.
So there was no consultation about that.
No, they asked for opinions as to whether the needed planners, engineers with particular expertise across certain fields, all that sort of stuff, which is pretty sensible to ask. They asked the same questions of the TLAs, as it turns out. But in the end, the composition of that panel was entirely a decision between the EPA and its minister, and nothing to do with us. And we didn't know anything about the composition of that panel until it was publicly announced. Okay, sort of turning to uptake. So obviously we've had a reasonable amount of activity in the last couple of months here now. Duncan McLeod has been on the job for around about 2.5 months, and I'll just give you sort of a few headline stats really. He's had 80 conversations. He's got 40, I think from off the top of my head, he's got about 48 EOIs. He's had 3 people as of today that I understand haven't been interested. in the EOIs, the expressions of interest, it is not a casual conversation. It says somebody just gives a castaway line on looking at water uptake. It is a detailed conversation that is usually taken over a period of time involving significant hours. So we think we're forming a pretty robust picture of potential uptake. Now I'll come back to the contracting phase later, but as of earlier this week, Duncan had expressions of interest for a bit over 20 million cubic metres of water. He's done that in 2.5 months. He's got a pipeline as big as the one that he's currently got expressed in expressions of interest. So I think my point there is that if anybody's speculating that there's not it's a pretty active level of interest in this proposition in the farming community, looking at one or two, then I'm not sure who they're talking to.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can interpolate the question back the other way.
Yep.
If they were converted, that's roughly 23% of the total.
Yes, roughly. Yep. Thank
you. Availability of because a figure has stopped and the clock stopped quite some time ago. What is being made to actually keep the public properly informed when they're being misinformed?
I think we've had as we have material information that's of value at various points, we'll communicate that, and I expect that there'll be some media action around this issue in the next few days. So all I would say though is that fundamentally for the team and myself, we've concentrated on actually delivering the actual result, whether this is financially feasible or not. That's predominantly where our focus is. So, but all I'd say is that there's a pretty active process underway there, and it's going quite well. Can I just add a couple of other points? Is that a lot of that the expressions of interest stuff are what I would classify as new water. So there are two classes of customer here. There's there's an existing irrigated class of customer, and there's a non-irrigated class of customer. Some of the irrigators, it's around about 20%, are affected by the proposed plan change, seasonal water allocation. In other words, given their current farming operations, irrigating practices, they'll be, and this is deep groundwater, not surface water and shallow groundwater, will be reasonably substantially impacted by that seasonal allocation process, which is a plan change issue, therefore in the hands of the EPA and to be worked through yet. So the reality is we're going to see from a number of the irrigators that they will take their time over the next 3-4 months, probably through this calendar year, before they determine their own ABS position in detail. And that's associated with the fact that they're dealing with a plan change and they're focused on the plan change, if that makes sense. So that just reaffirms that the water uptake work strand will take through till April, through to the end of March, assuming the timelines are maintained, to actually absolutely to achieve ultimate clarity.
We get an indication of how long has been spent on this. When did
Duncan started 2.5 months ago.
So we're only a fraction of the way into it, and we've already got 23% of the volume accounted for.
That's correct.
And that contract signed though, is it?
No, but it's non-binding. But I mean, it's a process. In other words, which has got a set of steps in it.
So through you to Mr. Newman, then it would be foolish to expect farmers to sign a binding contract at this point in time until we have absolute clarity around prices and delivery. Is that
absolutely?
So those out there who are claiming that because there's no binding contracts are really misleading the public, are they not?
Well, I don't
know. They are.
I just think I'd rather answer that question this way: is that ultimately there's no storage scheme in actuality until there is a consent. Number one, right? Despite everybody's conjecture, and thereafter, assuming you've got a consent that makes sense, from a scheme point of view, and that provides enough certainty, which flows on into on-farm financials and so forth, and and even the construction of the infrastructure itself, then nobody's going to finally bind themselves to a position, are they? So the point is that there's a phase. The real point is that we're running 4 work streams in parallel. So because if we didn't run this in an integrated fashion, we'd spend the next 10 years going through, we get this, then we do that, then we do that, and then we do that, and hopefully we might have ended up in a position where something was done. Well, it could take 10 years. That's unacceptable. We're all better off with certainty one way or the other, a meaningful time frame. That's the process we're running, really. But it's a financial close issue, April next year.
So if I'm a farmer and I sign one of those expressions of interest, am I free to walk away at any time?
Absolutely.
So it's pretty meaningless then, isn't it?
No.
Well, no, you're not signing it lightly, I think is the message.
But if I can walk away at any time, if I was
It's
a
not
smart
meaningless.
Farmer,
Sorry,
if I was
Councillor.
a smart farmer, I would probably want to have that in place as an option, but that doesn't bind me or commit me. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that not the
That's
case?
what you're hearing, but the process to get you to sign is not, I'll hedge this and just quickly sign this and gallop off at the end. You actually need to demonstrate that you have a whole range of issues that you've seriously considered and digested, if you like, before you sign it. I mean, it's not just, I'm going to have $1 each way here. Some may, absolutely, but it's not shaping up to be a dine and dash sort of a deal at the moment. Absolutely not.
Mr. Chairman, I might suggest that maybe some councillors have availed themselves of the opportunity of speaking with Duncan McLeod and getting a feel for what he's doing and how he's doing it and the results. It may be helpful that perhaps Duncan's available at perhaps one of the committee meetings where he can brief council on the process that he goes through.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Chair, could we have a copy of those agreements, please, to the councillors to look at? Why not?
You can have. I don't have it. No, the EIs are fine. I'm happy to have those circulated. That's fine. What you won't be getting is the personal detail of those who have signed.
I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking what we're talking about when you're talking.
It's fine.
I haven't seen one. No.
Well, Mr. Chair, the other side of the argument to that is that some groups are saying there's been no farmer uptake. So, you're buggered if you do and you're damned if you don't, rather, with you excuse the pun. But talking informally to one of the potential investors who has invested in the South Island, they said that they hope that the price is not too cheap per litre, because then it leads to a whole lot of wastage and increase in nutrients. So it was quite ironical, I thought, that so-called informal message.
The process we're going through with inviting expressions of interest is a normal procedure. It's got to be the first stage to get people to move further down into the process of committing itself. And 40 years ago, this is a mini scheme, the farmers in our district did a very innovative thing and put in a community water scheme from the Tuki, and this is exactly the process we went through. We all signed expression of interest, no commitment, and then it went to the next stage of design and so on, and that's just how it came to pass.
Okay. Those are probably the main headlines, I think, in terms of work progress. I don't know whether there's anything else I need to cover specifically. Helen Shea's here. There's been a fair whack of communication activity, Helen.
Yeah, again, perhaps through you to Helen, what's concerning me, I'm aware that there's political opposition to this project, and I can live with that. But what I can't live with is what I term to be deliberate misleading. In fact, I'd go so far to say is mischievous statements being made. And one of the most mischievous statements that's been put out there is that this dam is costing $600 million. And I took the opportunity of ringing Peter Fowler from Radio New Zealand 2 weeks ago to correct him. Radio New Zealand's continually stating that it's a $600 million dam. Mr. Fowler conceded that information was incorrect, and from there on he would inform the staff at Radio New Zealand that it was a $230 million dam. Indeed, it may reach the scheme may reach $600 million at some point in time, but it's not a $600 million dam. But unfortunately, there are some who keep perpetuating this deliberate mistake into the community. And I was just wondering if you, Mr. Newman, or perhaps Helen might be able to give us some indication of what you are doing to actually ensure that the true statements are made out in the public. What is HBRC or our communications team doing to rectify these deliberate misleadings or deliberate misinformation?
I think when we feel there's been I'll take a charitable view of it. When we think there's some misunderstandings or misperceptions about certain stats, using that as a case in point, then we are making sure that the relevant party is well informed, actually. So that's what we're doing, and we do that consistently. We don't necessarily put out a whole lot of media releases around those sorts of issues. It's much more of a relationship issue from my point of view. I might move on though, and just this is probably worth everybody hearing, is that.
Mr. Chair,
sorry. Can I finish what I was going to say, Chairman?
Order, Councillor.
Order. Choices document.
Order, Councillor.
That's 600 million.
Order, Councillor. Councillor, please.
I just want to finish off what I was going to say. Thanks, Councillor. Well, it's pretty clear. The off-farm infrastructure has got a feasibility level price estimate attached to it. 230 million, some financing costs, those sorts of things. The actual dam itself inside that is about 140 actually. So what it's worth, and then there's a series of potential on-farm conversions over a period of time that may or may not result in a figure of the one being quoted. That would be the absolute upper end of the range, and the reason I say that is the most expensive conversions are dairy, with the highest levels of capital intensity around dairy sheds, you name it. So, and it's definitely not going to go to all dairy. I can tell you that right now, and interestingly, in the pattern of expressions of interest, there's a fair amount of interest in intensive sheep and beef and arable. And lo and behold, surprise, surprise, it's not a surprise, because the volumetric price based on water charging drives water use efficiency, return on marginal capital, and we've got an in-region supply chain that favours those sectors over dairy.